The Power Moms Network, empowering moms to lift the world.
Welcome. I'm Riley Karsh.
I'm Tova Kopan.
We are thrilled to bring you the We Go Boldly podcast.
Let's talk big burning questions, life changes, and maybe a bit of personal business.
Let's be bold and brave together. Are you ready?
I am. Here comes the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to We Go Boldly, the podcast where we celebrate women stepping into their power and living their most authentic lives. We are also thrilled to be a part of the Power Moms Network. At Power Moms Network, we are empowering moms and creating a community of mothers mentoring other moms to greatness. Make sure you join us over there at Power Moms Network. It's a very cool place to be. You can sign up and become a member at any time. So, it's season 12. We started last week. We are talking all about self-authorship and colloquially, I can't say that word, known as writing your own story. And we're talking about that in context. So we're gonna have some hard conversations, I think, today. And before we get into all of that, I do want to remind everyone that we have an incredible community of like-minded women who get together every week. We talk about what's going on in the world. We talk about what's going on in our lives. And we really come together, support each other, grow together, create network, create community. It's a wonderful, wonderful place. We would love to have you join us. You can find out more about it at goboldlyinitiative.com/weekly circle. And you can sign up there. It's just I don't know, it's a life-changing place for us, so we hope it is for you too. With all of that being said, I'm going to welcome Tova to the show. We're going to celebrate the Eagles. We have our green on, and then we're going to dive into the topic. So Tova, congratulations and welcome to the show today. What's going on?
Well, yes. I thank you. Thank you for the congratulations. A lot of work in my home
Yeah.
went into it. There were signs made.
Yep.
I was very careful to not wear the same outfit for every week so that I didn't have to wear the same outfit for every week,
Good planning.
except for underwear. So lucky green underwear were on.
Yeah.
Um, and I had made a plan to not eat the same food every week so that we wouldn't have to make the same food every week.
Man.
And then the Super Bowl came, and my kids were like, now we have to make all the food that we've eaten over the entire playoffs.
That's a lot
And
of
I didn't
food.
eat any of it because I mean, I still have like 4 cheesesteaks in my fridge that we're having for dinner tonight because how do you eat when you're just like, this is so stressful?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so a lot of work in the Copan house
Yep.
into making that win happen. And you know, I it's sinking in.
Yeah.
I spend a lot of my my life, and this is for another episode probably, waiting for the other shoe to drop. And it was interesting because at the end of the game, um, we're watching the fanfare and stuff, and my 11-year-old is going to bed, and he's like, I gotta go to bed. I'm so tired. And he came to me and he was just like, I'm not like as excited as I thought I would be.
Hmm.
And I said, I think we're still waiting for the Chiefs to come back. Because, like, had it been a back and forth game like we were expecting, had it been super close, I think we would have conceptualized the win more. But
Yeah.
because the story didn't go the path that we were expecting it to go, I'm going to get us back to our purpose in a minute. Like, because it didn't go the way we had expected, we were all still waiting for this big comeback.
Yeah.
And that happened 2 years ago where the Eagles had been up and they have been up by 10 and then they lost. And so I think it didn't this morning in my home there was a lot of walking around going, the Eagles won the Super Bowl.
Hmm.
They w- they this and even last night, um my oldest kept going, this is the Super Bowl. Like it was really cognitively struggling to sink in. I'm sure this
Sure.
week the NFL Network will replay it and we'll watch the game and enjoy it. Um, but it is interesting when it's speaking to our theme, when the story doesn't go the way you think it's going to go, how it can be hard to process what is actually happening.
Mm-hmm.
And, even Jalen Hurts, um, who it seems seems very grounded from the outside looking in. And, he has all these things about keeping the main thing, which goes to talking about purpose, which is what we're going to talk about today. And really staying focused. He doesn't talk about goals. He says he has values and he lets his values be his guide. Um, but even at the end of the game, when he was having his very first interview, he said, they asked him, and because there was this iconic picture of him after the Super Bowl that they lost, where he was walking with all of the confetti with the Chiefs colors coming down on him. And maybe a year ago, somebody noticed that it was the screensaver for his phone,
Mm.
picture of him. And so Aaron Andrews said, look at the confetti. Look at the colors. Look at the colors of the confetti coming down. And he said, it's taking a while to sink in.
Yeah.
And they showed him, and I think it'll be a kind of an iconic video for all of us. I've had so many people send me this video now today of him after kind of all the hubbub and all the dancing and excitement in the locker room, sitting in a hallway with the Lombardi trophy and a cigar on the ground, just looking at it. And I think that, whether our story goes the way we want it to, or whether it is hard finding your purpose and then also kind of keeping that focus when things don't go the way that you want them to, and
Yeah.
kind of keep getting your body and your brain to catch up to everything.
Yeah. So let's turn to like more fully to our topic. And I
Yeah.
think, you know, on along the lines of what you've been saying, I like the idea, and I think this is how we look at purpose of it not being about goal setting, but it being about living your values, right? And so I think so many times, and I'll do some definitions for us in a second, but I think so many times people get caught up in the idea of I'm going to set these goals, I'm going to reach these milestones, I'm going to get to this place, and then I'll feel whatever I feel, right? As opposed to I'm going to live my values and I'm going to do the thing that I believe in over and over and over again. And maybe it'll get me to this place, but the place is not the the purpose, right? The purpose is the day-to-day value living. And I think that that today is more important than ever because, Tova, you and I have talked about this, and I just want to get on my soapbox for a second and have a quick conversation that will continue forever, I think, about what we talk about here on the show and in our social content and in our groups and all those things might seem I'm going to use the word trite at the moment, even though I don't believe that. It might seem trite to people out there, given the hardships we're kind of experiencing. And so many of us are afraid and angry and struggling and not knowing what's coming next. And all of those like really big, real, legitimate fears, concerns, feelings that people are having. And we've talked at length about that in our business discussions and our personal lives and how can we continue to put out the content we're putting out without seeming like we don't care what's going on. If you know us, obviously, you know that we care deeply and we, in our personal lives, do lots of activism and things like that. But from the perspective of our business and this podcast, we want to make sure that people understand we're here to support the people out there doing the work, right? Like we're out there doing the work too in a separate context, but like in our business, we are here to create the self-care you need so you can keep doing the work that you're doing, to create the space that you need so you can come and vent or you can come and relax, you can come and rest. whatever it is that you need so that you can keep doing the work you're doing, we want to provide that. And I think this conversation about purpose really speaks to that, because when you're out there sort of fighting the good fight, when you're out there doing the things that matter in the world, you are, living your purpose. And for the sake of definitions, because we like to have definitions, we like foundations around here. We'll say that purpose is the reason for which something exists or is done, and it can be defined as a deeper reason for existence that gives life meaning and direction. So that's why I think purpose is not really about goals. It's about
Yeah.
values. It's about living intentionally, finding a way to exist in a world that, maybe doesn't like the way you define yourself, maybe doesn't appreciate the color of your skin or your gender identity, or, the way you present yourself to the world. So finding a way that you can live with that hanging over you and still find joy, still find happiness, still find purpose is I think really what we're talking about today.
Yeah, and to go back to what you were saying, this is the first episode that we are recording in the context of the new administration,
Yeah,
and we knew it was coming, and we knew it would be bad, and I don't know if it's worse than we thought it would be because we knew it would be bad. Um, but it is once again chaotic, and we are not the same people that we were in 2017. And we are not the same people. We are not as naive. We are not as young. I am not as married. um, our kids are older. So we are having different, before we were very much able to navigate what we did, and then we could parent them separately. And there was a pretty distinct line between those two interactions. And now there can't be, whether it's because our children want to be part of the advocacy or whether because our children we need to have conversations with them as to what's happening in their schools. On a regular basis and what their roles are and how they need to be upstanders. Um, but and what their future holds. But either way, we also knew what we did well and what we didn't do well 8 years ago. And I think I can speak for both of us that there were boundaries that we didn't set really well in protecting our own energy and knowing what we have at home and just who we have to care for in our own lives. We know that those boundaries are going to be even more important this round. And so I think that is one reason of many that we have spent a lot of time talking about what is our role um, in this second round. Not to say that we haven't been active over the last 8 years
yeah,
or 4 years, to be honest, like the middle four, and here we are again. Um, but that we knew that it wasn't going to look the same for us as it did, in the first term. And we also know, because we've experienced and lived it, um, that, and I think I saw somebody post this the other day, that it can't be hard all the time. You can't be going hard all the time. And we recognize that there are people that do not have the choice
right,
to not be in the hard all the time. And whether it is because they're choosing the advocacy or whether because they're not choosing the hard, and it is unrelated to advocacy, it is related to just their life and survival. Um, so I think our point to a certain extent is if you have the choice to be able to step out and refuel and refresh and be able to then go back in and tag back in to whatever it is that you're doing, that is a blessing to everyone that
yeah,
you're in the fight with. Um, so um, we are still figuring out how Go Boldly, both the podcast and our larger business fit. But I think we are being guided by our values
Hmm.
to figure out its purpose.
Yep.
And we've been having a lot of conversations about it. And I think, fortunately, our values. It's funny. Riley and I are so different in so many ways, and in many ways, we're just like so exactly the same. So it works out very well. It's only the things that aren't the important
Yeah.
that we're
It's
not
actually
the
the
same.
good ways where we're different, where it's
Yeah.
complementary, not the values. Let's take a quick break. And when we come back, let's talk about how you can define purpose for yourself and how you can then sort of once you've done that, how you can discover your own purpose. So we'll be right back after this break, everyone. Well, hello there, ladies. Are you ready to elevate your life and connect with like-minded souls? Join us every week at the Go Boldly Together weekly women's circle, where strength meets sisterhood. Dive into empowering discussions, share your victories, and navigate challenges together. Our circle is a safe space for growth and inspiration. Experience the power of collective wisdom and unleash your full potential. Don't miss out on the transformative energy. Click the link in our show notes or visit us at goboldlyinitiative.com/women's weekly group to learn more about our Go Boldly Circle today. Together, let's embrace the journey of personal development and let's celebrate that unstoppable force within each of us. Okay, welcome back to the show. So before the break, I mentioned that we're going to start talking about like how do you even define purpose? What does it mean? All those fun things. So I gave you sort of the textbook definition of purpose, but I think it goes beyond that textbook definition. I think it goes deeper into your values. It goes deeper into looking for what you're passionate about, looking for people that you admire deeply, and not just because they're out there like, you know, being quote successful, like people, it could be your neighborhood librarian who's fighting against book banning, right?
Yeah.
Like who do you see in your life um that inspires you, and in what way do they inspire you, and in what way does that inspiration then translate into your own life? And it might not be that you're out there fighting against book banning. Maybe you're like such a great activist, putting the job on the line, putting everything on the line. Okay, I'm going to be an activist in this other area, right? um Looking for what impact you want to leave. What do you want people to remember about you? What do you want people to remember about your life? Which seems morbid, but it's not. Like we're, life is life. It's gonna life. And so when you're not here anymore, what do you want your kids, your grandkids, your friends, your, people who maybe knew you, what do you want them to think about your life? Um, and when you bring all of that together, you can sort of create um almost like we talk about this, we have a whole course on it, almost a personal mission statement, right? Of what is, I don't know why I'm saying almost, it is a personal mission statement of, where do you want to where do you want your life to go? Like in what direction do you want to move, and how do your values align with that direction? um Go
And
ahead.
I love this focus on values, right? And I hate to bring up the Eagles again. I don't, but I do.
No, you don't.
Um, but it just tracks so well with this conversation. And part of it is because the Eagles won in many different ways this year, right? They won by throwing the ball bunch. They won by Saquon Barkley just running literally more yards than any other person has ever run the ball in the NFL ever. Um, and they won by their defense stepping up. I mean, they found a way to win, and they figured out what the other team was doing, and they're like, okay, this is how we're going to win. And if their goal had been to, we're going to win this way, right? If they equated purpose as goals, and we're going to win X, Y, or Z way, they would not have been in the Super Bowl. They certainly wouldn't have won the Super Bowl because Saquon Barkley could not run yesterday. Um, uh, but they had these larger purpose, and their values as a team went like every person has a role, every person can step up. And I kept watching the game yesterday, and I watch all these games and I love these players so much. And I'm thinking, "Oh, but I want him to have a play and I want him to have a play." And I made a comment to one of my boys and I said, "I haven't seen him at all." And he was like, "Well, but he made that tackle or he did that." And even as I say, well, Saquon Barkley didn't run. He had so many great blocks, and him just trying to run over and over set up the whole offense. And my point is, when you base your purpose and the path that you're trying to take, when you base it in values, I think that it will take you different directions, maybe farther and better than you could have even imagined or dreamed. But it also means that you aren't limited by goals that you set.
Yeah.
And I think about myself in high school where I had goals and really like lesser than goals. I had check boxes that I wanted to check off my to-do list of life. And when I ran out of the boxes, and Michelle Obama talks about this in her book, um, Becoming, I believe, where she checks off these boxes and then she was like, okay, what's next? Um, because you finish your goals and then you're like, well, what's next? But
Right.
when your purpose is rooted in your values, then that is what is going to help you find your way and define your course and whatever
Yeah.
nautical theme we want to,
Yeah.
go. And you don't sort of run out of the what's next. And you also don't get as flustered when life takes you in a different direction than you originally planned
Right.
because you are grounded in your values.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the most important aspect of living, of equating purpose with values is when you fail, when you don't reach the outcome you thought you were going to reach, when, you make a choice and it doesn't work out the way you were hoping it would work out. If you are doing all of that while simultaneously living your values, you haven't lost. You simply didn't reach the outcome you thought you would reach, right? And so it's much easier to get up from that sort of knockdown when you're like, yeah, okay, but I am like, I'm working hard. I'm exercising empathy. I am, supporting, I'm advocating for people who need advocacy, whatever you're doing. Um, if it doesn't work out, it hurts, it feels terrible, you don't
Mhm.
like it, it's not what you wanted. However, you still have that vein of like, okay, but I'm living my purpose. These are my values. This is where I'm going. And now, as you said, Toby, you can pivot to, all right, well, that didn't work. Now I'm going to try this. It's still aligned with my values. It's still where how I want to be living my life. And I think that makes it, as you say, like much easier to suffer the loss. I'm not saying suffering the loss is easy because it's not. Look at us. It's it's horrifying, but at the same time, you can take pride in living your values in that way.
I think I heard someone talk about I somewhere, so God knows where, but somebody said that they asked them what their favorite part of this of the year was last year, and
Hmm.
someone said something about that time of the year where it was like the Olympics and Kamala just had her first really big rally and it was just really exciting.
Mm,
And they were like, yeah, but she lost. And it's like, well, that doesn't take away from that moment where
yeah,
like the women were doing amazing things at the Olympics and, the rugby team was doing amazing and Kamala was just like hitting her stride in the campaign and it felt so good.
yeah,
That was in alignment with who we are and our values and what we want for this country and our children and us. And we lost. It does not take that feeling away.
right.
And it kind of reminded me that I think um had we woken up today with a loss, we because of the team that we love, it would have taken a while, but we would have gotten to go back and look at all the things that we love about them, because they are who they say they are. They would have had the whole conversation about the values and blah blah blah, even had they lost, um, and and it- life hits you a lot, but when you do have this as your base of your story, it does help you get back up.
Yeah, so I we haven't really touched on that as much as maybe we should. And that is like the whole season is about writing your own story, right? About creating your destiny, all those like sort of grand ideals of what we can do, right? And I think when we talk about purpose, it's the foundation of writing your story. And so the great news is you can reflect on your story to date, right? Like where how it's come to today, and you can make changes, right? You can edit it. You can like be like, I'm going to make a different choice. It's choose your own adventure in real life, right? Like
Yeah.
you get to make different choices. That does not mean there are not people out there messing up your life and messing up your choices and like getting in the way of you doing what you want to be doing. However, you still can, direct your values. And I think that's why we want to have this conversation around purpose. Like if somebody's out there telling you that like trans people don't exist, then you don't have to be like, okay, right? You don't have to be like, oh, that's my story now. Unfortunately, your story is that there's horrible people out there saying trans people don't exist. But your story is also that, if you are trans or if you have, if you're an empathetic, kind human being who respects
You
other
understand
values,
science. I don't
yeah,
know.
then you can say, well, that's the narrative that the culture is putting out there. That's not my narrative, right? You can change those things. You can make choices that allow you to live your values and beliefs and truths. Um, I don't know where I lost my train of thought on that because I got
No, but
heated.
yeah, I think that as we write the story, and as you said, like you're going to get pushed off course, but
Yeah,
you get to make choices, and you can choose right now that you don't like the story that you're writing, or you can choose right now that, or you can recognize right now that the story that you're writing is not in alignment with your values.
yeah.
If
I
it's
mean, I
not,
really wish a lot of people would do that.
yeah. Well,
Just
that
saying.
takes a lot of whew, big self-reflection
Yeah.
and painful self-reflection.
Yep.
Not impossible, just big and
Unlikely at
painful.
the moment.
Um, but I think that, it is possible, and I need to I need to remember these things, and I will find it again because I will share it with everyone, as because I'd like to read this book. But someone talked about, I just saw on Instagram, I must be following her, making imperfect choices.
Mm,
And she talked about, it was an instance, they were going to go on a family vacation and they were going to go to New Zealand, and her son had the flu. And it was like, do we all mask up and still try to push this because we can't go to, like, we can't reschedule New Zealand anytime soon? Or do we take the airline credits and go somewhere else on spring break in a couple months? And she talked about them being imperfect choices. And I
yeah.
I felt like she talked about how your gut can still tell you what to do. Like you can still have a gut feeling, even if it's like a bad choice. Like even if you're like she said, I knew that we could not take our son who was struggling with the flu on an airplane to New Zealand. Like that was ridiculous, but it still wasn't a good choice. Like it wasn't one we wanted to do. And I think that's the important thing too, is like if you remember those choose your own adventure books, they were often between two wacky choices.
Yeah. They
And
were
as
rarely like have rainbows or have chocolate. Like,
and I think as kids we thought like this is crazy.
yeah.
And now we're like, oh, yeah,
Oh,
that tracks.
that feels accurate.
Yeah. And I think that that's important. Like if you're, unless you've like just managed to be like 22 and you have a great job and you're single and you're, I don't know, like debt free. I don't know if that unicorn exists.
Is that an option here?
Um, like I think every choice, but even that, like, do you move back home? Do you move with friends? Like every choice has a layer to it. And
Right.
so there are no clean choices. But that doesn't mean that you don't get to make them.
Right.
And you don't get to decide what hard you get to deal with and what messy you get to choose. Um, and you get to write your own story. And I think what feels I don't want to do a armchair, analysis of an entire 33% of our country. But I think that part of the reason we see people digging in so deeply into their belief structure in politics is because it is not in alignment. Not all of them, because I do not want to go down the rabbit hole of evangelical Christianity and how, like, it actually is very much in alignment with their belief structure.
Right.
But there is a big chunk of people that it's actually not in alignment with their belief structure. And so they have to just keep digging in more because otherwise they're going to have to recognize that it is actually they're writing a story that is so against their values and so against who they are. Um, by the way, uh, that is not, I'm not giving anyone an excuse. That was
No.
not me
And I think I'm
giving,
more cynical in that I think there's very few of those people. But like on the along all of those lines, right? Like back to what can you do as
yeah,
an individual to discover your purpose, right? So your purpose is obviously shaped by your experiences, your challenges, your triumphs, all of those things throughout your life. It's shaped by your family dynamics, it's shaped by, what quote group you are born into. It's shaped by the people you meet along the way, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. That's all part of life. Um, but the way to sort of, first of all, it requires, I think, a lot of self-reflection, right? To figure out like, what is my purpose? Maybe you think you know immediately and you're like, my purpose is to make, maybe you're a comedian and your purpose is to make people laugh. And that's awesome. It's a great purpose. Um, but also like on the flip side of that, so many comedians are actually like really depressed, struggle with substance abuse, like have very dark things happening in their lives. And so examining the purpose helps you understand yourself better and helps you write a story that feels more authentic to who you are and who you want to be, because sometimes those things don't match. I know for myself, oftentimes they don't match. I'm like, oh, I really want to be somebody who exercises every day. Look, it doesn't happen every day, right? I mean, I'm joking, but like it does go that way for a lot of
yeah.
us, a lot of times. Um, and so how do you kind of dive more into the purpose of life, your life? You have more experiences. We talk about this all the time. You try
Yeah.
new things, you get around different people, you explore different cultures, you learn about like different aspects of history. You get curious about the world, and that is how you discover what are your values? What are you passionate about? What excites you? What do you want to lean into? What do you want nothing to do with, right? There's so many different aspects that get into that, but you're not going to have any of that if you don't try new things, right? If you don't go new places, if you don't talk to different people. Like if you stay in your little bubble in your little town that you've never left and you're never going anywhere, you're not learning new things about people. That's like I don't see how you, I mean, I guess you could get on the internet and
I mean,
do
books
it,
are a
but
good start, honestly.
yeah, that's true. That's true. Books are a great way to explore different worlds, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. I think it's a
Yeah.
great way to explore the world at large if you can't get anywhere, right?
And I think that, I'm having weird feelings about Mel Robbins. And I don't and they're uninformed, so that's all I'm going to say. But I remember her telling a story about years ago. She was working in a coffee shop, not working, she was like doing work in a coffee
Sitting in
shop,
a coffee shop
sitting in a
working.
coffee
Yeah.
shop. And she was like, I think I want to own a coffee shop. Like, I would
Mm,
love to own a coffee shop.
hmm
And so she decided, I think her husband encouraged her maybe um, that she would uh, that she'd get a job at a coffee shop because she'd never been like a barista or something.
Right.
And or maybe it was when like maybe she hadn't been working at a coffee shop. Maybe she like ran into one and when she was practicing law and she like hated practicing law and she was like saw all these people like sitting around and she was like, "Oh, I want to, I want to own a coffee shop. That seems so nice." Anyway, she must have gotten a job, or I'm telling the story messed up, but we can pretend I'm telling it correctly. So she gets a job at a coffee shop and she's a barista for like a day and she realizes like, "No, I don't want to be a barista. I don't want to own a coffee shop. I want a job where I have the flexibility to work in a coffee shop."
Right.
And I think that just I point that out because I think that's where experiences are really, really important. Like I I think that that's where you can kind of figure out like I think about our friend Natalie who was on um the call was I was a guest
Hmm.
and she worked for a law firm for a very long time and she was always involved as an advocate and in activism. And then at some point she realized that it wasn't enough for it to be like a side thing. And it also became bigger and bigger and bigger part of her side life. That then she needed to figure out a way to integrate it into her work life, which
Right.
she did at her current job or the job that she currently had at the time. And then she ended up leaving that job to make it like a much larger part of her life. Like she just figured out, like at first it felt good that it was an active part of her side hustle, so to speak, of activism.
Yeah.
And then that wasn't enough. Um, and I think, like you need to figure out like, do I just like to buy books or maybe I want to own a bookshop? Or
Right. Or support independent booksellers or support
yeah,
independent publishers or whatever.
or like maybe going back to your like the librarian thought, like our town library has two different volunteer organizations that support it. Like one for sort of run fundraising the charitable aspect of the library, and then one's for like the advocacy for the library. So there's like loads of ways like try things out,
Yeah.
see what fits for you, because there are so many options. Um, Maybe all you do need is to keep your life exactly the way it is and pick up 4 hours to volunteer at the library on Saturdays. I don't know. Maybe you flip the whole thing upside down.
Yeah.
Who's to
But you
say?
won't know unless you try different things, unless you allow different things in your life. Let's take another quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about creating a life roadmap. And this is where we can get a little creative and have a little fun. So we will be right back after this break.
Hey, pod friends, it's us again. Looking for a place to collaborate, an opportunity to share your knowledge? Have you been working so hard on a podcast, book, course, product, or retreat? Do you have insights that could light up our podcast? Well, we want to hear from you. We would love to support you in all that you are and do. Join us at Go Boldly Initiative, where we celebrate diverse perspectives and share the wisdom of our incredible community. Whether you're an expert, a hobbyist, or simply love learning, we invite you to reach out with your ideas. Visit our website at goboldlyinitiative.com/podcast guests to pitch the show or shoot us an email at hello@goboldlyinitiative.com to talk all things collaboration, advertising, and affiliation opportunities. Become part of our growing family. Let's make learning an adventure together.
Okay, so welcome back to the show. Before the break, I mentioned creating a life roadmap. That is a fancy way of saying a vision board, I think. But also, you could do it in numerous different ways. One thing Tova and I have talked about, and we've both read in various places, is how powerful creativity is for self-care, for rest, for reflection, for all of those things. And so one of the things we like to incorporate in these conversations and the way we look at purpose and the way we look at writing your story is to incorporate some creativity into that, because even if you're a person who's like, I don't have a creative bone in my body, I can't paint, I can't draw, I can't whatever, knit, whatever it is, um there's always a way to be creative. Creativity isn't defined by anyone but you. And so we like this idea of a life roadmap because it allows you to take all of those values you identify, the purpose you think is right for you right now, and put it into a visual sort of guide so that you know, okay, going forward, like I have mine on my laptop. It's my screensaver. Screensaver. I think I've told you guys that before. And it reminds me every time I turn on my laptop, like, oh, those are my core values. Oh, these are the things that I love. And it's like from everything from, like I said, core values to colors that bring me like peace and tranquility and joy and all of those things. So it can be a way for you to remind yourself of how you want to live your life, how you want to write your story, and especially on like extreme days, right? Like whether it's
Mhm.
extreme good, extreme bad, whatever those like big highs and lows that we all get sometimes. Um, Having that little reminder, the visual reminder, is a great thing to help you reset and to like take a pause and a deep breath and go, okay, yeah, this is not the greatest day, but like this is where I'm going. Um, and you could do it in so many different ways. We're hosting a workshop this week, next week, soon.
Yeah, we'll
um,
be hosting. So by the time you listen to this one, the one this week is probably past. But we are hosting one on the 20th, Thursday night, the February 20th.
yeah,
So this is still time for you to go over to our website and goboldlyinitiative.com and sign up for it. And yeah, we would love, or the link in the bio and Instagram, and sign up for it.
yeah. And beyond just making a visual sort of representation of your purpose and the key milestones that you have reached in your life and things that you're hoping for in the future and personal values, whatever your sort of core goals are and all of that stuff. I know he said it's not about goals, but there are like it's still good to set goals. It's just
Yeah.
that's not your purpose.
Yeah.
And you can do it that way. You can also just write it down, right? Like you can like I don't know, I'm thinking back to middle school where you had to like do a timeline and you put down like different dates of things. I mean, you could do it that way. You can do it any way that feels good to you that you think will be useful. Um and I think it's something that can uplift you and remind you, okay, like yeah, this is hard today, and yet like I'm still living my core value of openness. And also, just so you can Google values. Like if you're like, I don't know what my values are, I've never thought about like the name of a value. There is no shame in Googling what, like, hey, Google, give me a list of values.
Yeah.
And then going through it and be like, oh, okay, these five make sense to me. I think that that's like a perfectly good, sensible thing to
Well, and
do.
I
I did
think,
it.
I mean, if you're like both of us, once you do that, you'll start hearing people talk about values all the time.
Yeah,
Like you'll notice. I mean, if I didn't know these conversation was coming up, would I have heard every press conference yesterday and this morning that I was watching for the Eagles basically talk about exactly what we're talking about
right.
today? Probably not. But you start reading books and they'll be like, that is, you know, I'm finishing up very slowly because I'm trying to just make it last as long as possible. Onyx Storm, and it's like every character I could talk about what they value, right?
Yeah,
Like, and you start just thinking of things that way, and then that can help inform. Like, okay, I know that this character values this, but I don't really relate to her. But
right.
this character values this, and I really relate to them.
Yeah.
It helps. But I do think the Googling thing is a great starter.
Absolutely. And I just want to like highlight something you said. You're talking about a work of fiction, right? And which is great. And I think people often feel like if somebody doesn't say my values are X, Y, and Z, then they're not talking about values. You can see it anywhere, right? Like you can learn from works of fiction about
Talking
like,
about works in fiction, it's a romantasy with dragons.
yeah, 100%, which is
Yeah.
fabulous, by the way. Love it.
Yeah.
Um, you can see, you can get ideas for where, I mean, listen, you're probably not going to like wind up in a land of dragons, but like maybe your values align with like something that a dragon's value. I don't know. I'm getting off track here, but like you can read fiction and find nuggets in them about like what you want your life to look like, the kind of people you want in your life. I mean, if we all haven't been reevaluating the people in our lives for the last 10 years, I don't know what we've been doing. Um
Well,
like
and I will say, when I am struggling with anything, traumatic, big T or otherwise, um, fiction helps me the most
mm,
because
that's
I
why I've
will,
been reading so much for the last 10 years. Sorry.
um, yes, accurate. Um, but and I will find themes that maybe aren't really loud for other people because they're not necessarily speaking to that audience.
Right.
Um, but I will learn from these characters so much that I didn't even know I needed to learn.
Yeah.
Where had someone come out and said, Tova, you're in a really bad marriage, I would have been like, no, I'm not. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Go away. But when I read about a marriage and I look at it and I go, oh, this is very much like mine. Well, this doesn't seem very fun. Like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
just, and good or bad or otherwise, like the positive is finding your values, but you can just learn so much, or you can say, oh, wow, I love the way she spends her day. Or I love, like, just because it's fiction doesn't mean it's not real life. Romanticy aside, like, you know, dragons.
But the setting is
Yeah.
one thing. The character development is a different thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so like yeah, the set like you're not going to go off into the land of fae and fairies, right? Like that's not real. Um but the character might be a real like real-ish character, right? Like the way they talk about life, the way they interact with other people, the way they like you just said, spend their day. Like all of those things can be interpreted in a way that helps you figure out this is what I want in my life. This is what I don't want in my life. This is what I've been missing. This is what I want to add, all of those
Or like,
things.
yeah, or like the way those two that the way that relationship exists.
Yeah,
That is really important. Or I really appreciate the way they respect each other, or I don't appreciate the way they speak to each other. Like
right.
you can learn a lot about what you value.
What you
Um,
value and what you need, right? Like, I
yeah.
think that was a big realization for me along the way is like recognizing that there are things that I needed in my life, in my partners, in my friends that I wasn't getting that I didn't even realize I wanted because maybe like I don't know, maybe growing up like you didn't know that it was a thing, like that it was real. Like we've talked about this where you're telling a story to somebody and they're like horrified by the story and you're like, "Wait, what?" You
You're
have
like,
no idea that
that was the
it's
fun part.
you have no idea that it was a horrifying story because you have no context for any other way of being.
I
And I think books really help you sort of sort through that.
Yeah, in a less embarrassing setting.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
I do want
S-
to say real fast,
sure.
just because it will drive me crazy if I forget to mention this. So I feel like before a lot of the stuff that we talk about and read and do was mainstream. So before Oprah,
Yeah.
basically. Um, the one saying that seemed to like it must have been like in I don't know, sales meetings, and it got on those posters that would have like a sunset or something. And
Mhm.
it was like, it's about the journey, not the destination. And I just feel like that's basically what we've talked about today.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah,
it just like kept sticking in my head, like, oh, this is like, but it's like the first thing I remember
yeah,
as that this kind of thing. And it was said so many times that it was a punchline. So then we had to ignore it for like 30 years.
right. But now it's back.
But it's true.
Um, we do need to wrap up, but let's just throw in, I mean, we talked about this in the beginning. There are obstacles that will need to be overcome in figuring out your purpose, in your journey in life, in your writing your own story. Some people will experience far more obstacles than others. Some common obstacles that are not necessarily the big ones that we've already talked about. External expectations, fear of failure, lack of clarity, procrastination, lack of support, negative self-talk, all of those things get in the way of us not only figuring out our purpose, but living our purpose. And writing our story, right? Like those things get in the way all the time. And procrastination, I think, is an important one because a lot of times we think it's a matter of willpower. And I know, Tova, you have big feelings about this. I do as well. You're better at articulating them, but like procrastination is not about willpower. You can't will it away. Like oftentimes procrastination is a symptom of some larger thing going on, right? Whether it's something, maybe you have undiagnosed neurodiversity, maybe you're depressed, maybe there are people in your way of getting things done, maybe you have too much on your plate. There's so much that goes into
Yeah.
procrastination that I think that one is a tricky one for me, but I do think it should be a flag for all of us. Like if you find yourself procrastinating all the time, don't sit there and tell yourself what a horrible person you are. Sit there and go, why am I procrastinating so much? Like, what is it? Be curious about it. What is causing this procrastination in my life? Because it's probably not a matter of you being lazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would just say, just as a reminder, there are other things that can keep us from writing our story or finding our purpose as quickly as we'd like.
Mm-hmm.
The recycling, the trash, the dishes, the laundry, the bills that need to
Life.
be paid. Yeah, life.
Yeah.
And taking the kids places, just like doing things. We do not all have the same 24 hours in a day. And so if you are putting timelines on things that are artificial, it can get so frustrating so fast. Um, we are all. I mean, we just had our first call for the week, or for the circle for the month, and we talked about what our intentions were for the month. So we're not saying like just don't even try because life is hard.
Right.
Um, but I do think it's important to remember that it doesn't all have to happen at once. And you can say, oh, well, if my goal is to sit down with my journal every day and I do it twice a week and I have not done it at all in the last 5 years, then
Right.
that's like way more times than the last 5 years. And honestly, like, even if I'm thinking about it on the other days and I'm just thinking about these things as I'm driving kids around, but I only manage to jot it down twice a week, that's massive. That's huge and amazing. So, there are both the big things that you mentioned, and then there's just like everything else.
Yeah.
And there, it's all legitimate, but it doesn't mean that we don't have to we don't get to prioritize ourselves and prioritize these things.
Yeah. And just sort of to sum that up, like in doing life, right? Whatever that is for you, whether it's like single parenting, dual parenting, not parenting, but in lifing, it doesn't have to like be perfect. It doesn't, you don't have to do, as you say, like all the things at once in order to be okay with the one thing you did. Like
Yeah.
you can celebrate the one thing that got done without like destroying yourself over the 25 other things because you'll get them done or you won't, or it'll all work out. Like it'll be okay. Um, and I think we oftentimes find ourselves not doing things because we didn't do it perfectly from the beginning, right? Like the first day didn't go the way we wanted, so why bother on the second day? It's that like Sunday night, on Monday I'm going to start my diet, which don't diet. On Monday I'm going to start meditating every day. Like okay, but you could, you know, you could, it's going to happen when you're ready for it to happen. Those kinds of things. So living your purpose is I think it's really challenging. It can be really overwhelming. It can feel like a way bigger deal than we realize, but it's also satisfying in so many ways. I want to make sure we're acknowledging our privilege in what we do, and that we are acknowledging the sort of destructive nature of the world at the moment and how much harder it makes everything for everyone who is trying to live their purpose in a, you know, not, I'm trying to find the right words, in a kind way, I guess. I
Yeah.
that's not the words I want to use, but um so if you want to think about this more, we have journal prompts every Sunday night. We share them in our newsletter, we share them on our social media. And the goal of those is to help you sort of through this process of writing your own story and figuring out your purpose and figuring out like what's working, what isn't working, where do I want to be, who do I want to be, all of those big life questions, but it breaks them down into much smaller, like more manageable pieces, because I know it can feel overwhelming. It does to me to say, hey, what's your purpose? I'm like, I'm trying to survive today, like that's my
Yeah.
purpose. And frankly that might be your purpose at the moment. But the point of all of these prompts for us is to help you guys like take it little by little, right? Like little bite-sized pieces. And like we said before, you don't have to figure it all out in the first day, in the first minute. That's not really a reasonable expectation. So your homework for the week is to check out those journal prompts, make sure you're signed up for our newsletter, make sure you're following us on social media, and to let us know what it is you think your purpose might be. And if we can help you, let us know that too. You can tag us on social media at Go Boldly Together. You can share your sort of thoughts and feelings about all of this with us at any time. We would love to hear from you. And make sure you check out our upcoming workshop because it's a great place to start for this whole process. So I think that's it for the week, Tova, unless you have anything to add.
Go birds.
Go birds. All right, everyone. We will be back next week with another episode helping you figure out how to write your own story and make sure you are living your personal values. So until then, have a wonderful, wonderful week, everyone.
Thanks so much for listening to We Go Boldly podcast. We know you're busy and we love spending time with you.
If you enjoyed this week's episode, let us know. Head to Apple Podcasts right now to rate and review our show. While you're there, be sure to click that subscribe button.
Want more us time? Follow us on all the socials at Go Boldly Together.
Want even more us time? As in all the coaching pizzazz. Find us at goboldlyinitiative.com for all the info.
We will be back with more excitement, research, and deep thoughts next week.
Until then, keep on being the bold, brave, amazing people we know you already are.
The Power Moms Network, empowering moms to lift the world.